This is your bread and butter, AI governance, risk and ethics. Just to reintroduce, my name is Devinder.
Ganesan.
My name is Kartik. Okay.
I'll do my best in a time.
Awesome.
I was going to say, this is kind of your bread and butter, so let's start with you.
Absolutely. I think, if we were to start out this conversation, I feel like you guys are building some very exciting technologies in AI.
Yeah.
Where do you guys, and how do you guys quantify risk? Where do you guys look at risk and how do you quantify it?
There's a bunch of places. Well, Doctor, did you want to take that first?
Sure. So AI can be very useful, and it is going to be disrupting how we treat patients and how many patients we are treating at a time. It's going to be very interesting in the future. However, the same scale can apply for the risks also. It can impact millions in a second, and it can also cause big disruptions inside organizations also. People try to improve the efficiency internally, but whenever you go for this efficiency, there's always a blind spot that we miss, and then there is a big risk, and a lot of people are impacted. So the risk can be coming from any angle. The most important that we are thinking right now is the privacy, explainability issues, and accountability, how much you can trust this, and how biased is the system, right? So these are some of the four things that we usually think about right now. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give you my lens. I think all of that is an excellent answer. I'll give you my lens, which is more recently been medical devices and medtech. So the FDA itself takes a risk-based approach. And recently they came out with some guidance, some documentation on both security and AI and how to approach it. But it's also the framework of risk that they use. We can kind of use that in anything that they haven't covered. And if you take a risk-based approach to tackle problems like, can we use a copilot? That's technically using an AI, but the endpoint isn't AI for the user. Human in the loop really helps. And if you come to some of the discussions from a lot of the lawyers around this subject of regulation, you start to see where we can take that risk-based approach and iteratively figure out how we can not only remain compliant, but actually increase our scope. And if you take it, the same conversation about AI to a regulator or to someone who's doing like auditing, with this point of view that no, we're not just going to do what we used to do. We're going to do 10 times more, and it's going to be so much more secure. I think that conversation just goes way better.
Absolutely. I think, Ganesan, you said something very important, which is, as you start to automate more, if you have an error rate of 0.01, and you're automating more and more and more, and you're increasing the likelihood of that 0.01 now actually having a catastrophic effect, your risk goes up the more you automate, right? But the other thing the riskiest thing is the unknown risk. Stuff you can't build a framework for, stuff you can't think through, and maybe this is a personal opinion, governments can't think through because they are following what practitioners have seen. These are known risks. Everyone knows how to, when you're driving a car, how to avoid a blind spot. However, if you're building risk, if you're looking at risk in AI, what you want to be looking for is, let's imagine the worst possible thing that can happen. What do you do next? And this is where standard operating procedures are super helpful because this is where humans need to step in, right? We're always going to have that little piece of risk, and if that's not keeping you up at night, then you don't care enough about your users.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Kartik. And think about it. If you try to create a one framework for all of AI, it's huge risk. That is a big risk. Because AI is not such a technology that you can use in one part of the business or one industry. It is everywhere. You can use it in so many different ways. So the risk comes out differently if it is used internally in a HR versus a customer services versus somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? So it's very different. The risk will be very different in individually these areas within one company. But then think about different industries.
Yeah.
It's going to be so much different. And if you just say that, okay, hey, I give you this framework and it's going to solve all the issues, that's completely wrong. So that's why I think it's always good to go ask the first question, what is your business? What do you try to solve the problem? What is the problem you're solving through AI? What is going in? What is coming out? And you got to make sure it is individualized and it's basically more personalized kind of thing. I would say it's like a personalized medicine. The AI should be a personalized.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, personalized AI governance. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
I'll pitch the next question for you two if you're interested. Bias and fairness. This is a very different take, right? Because now one of the early projects I worked on had to really account for a much larger population in skin analysis, right? And there's similar things that come across in AI all the time. They make huge headlines in the news. Right. Are we doing enough to address bias and unfairness or fairness in AI? And what are approaches that we can take to do a better job?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can start. I think, definitely you can look at bias from a technical perspective of bias in the data set. So if you are looking at, hey, we're going to build a generative AI, built on top of some of the open source models that are already out there. Well, first of all, a lot of those open source models were trained on the heap, which is pretty much the internet. And so right off the bat, you have a bias of folks that are not on the internet, right? So what you really need to think about is how are you going to get gold standard data set that will cover a certain amount of population that you're going to keep in scope. You can't go after everything, but what you can definitely try to do is chart out a map of when to use AI for different populations. There's a very classic example that's used in bias. If you pick up a bias book, you'll see it very often, which is Muslim women in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They rarely get health care. And the reason why it's a cultural bias that's built into that community. But in fact, they're one of the most prolific users of AI technology because they can ask questions in private. Unfortunately, because they've never been on the internet talking about their issues in the way that they think, large language models are completely blind to them. And in fact, we've seen other type of biases like this where, computer vision models were trained on predominantly white males, so black people were completely invisible to computer vision models. And these are difficult topics to talk about, but as AI practitioners, we have to be transparent that our data sets are probably always going to be biased. So if you know the bias in your data set, make sure you have, transparently putting it out there. Hey, we're not ready to serve you yet, but in fact, if you would work with us, we would love to improve our data sets. That transparency is going to build trust. So that's bias, but we can talk also about ethics. Ethics is like its own thing, but let's start with bias.
Very nicely said, Kartik. So I put, okay, if bias is a poison, then what is the antidote? Diversity, right?
Yeah.
You go, if it is data, right? Data diversity, the more diversity you bring in, the more bias is reduced and the fairness comes in. So in this spectrum, if you train your data with more and more diverse data sample, then the possibility of reducing the bias decreases, but it's never going to be zero, like Kartik said. It's always going to be there. And recognizing that, and you may want to have some thresholds. Like if you are saying, I'm going to serve these clients, these are these problems that I'm going to solve, that's where, the experts should identify, okay, you know what? You can only say, these are the clients I'm going to serve, or these are the problems I'm going to solve, and terms and conditions. So all these problems can be mitigated. Yep. It's just that we need to be aware, be proactive. Let's start doing some work on this, because you go on only innovation and tech, how I use this AI, how I build it more, only one thing, that's not enough. You need to have two horses in the chariot. The other horse is going to be ethics and risk. You need to make sure you are parallelly taking care of both of them to be very successful. So that's something I wanted to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To drive something into the specifics, I think the only thing I have to add to these two wonderful answers is that we can take a lot of lessons learned from previous technologies. A lot of the AI utilized today around LLMs is essentially search. And we have a corpus of data on how to do search and give better bias endpoints, right? And so if we utilize, what we already know from the past and add that to our governance frameworks, where we already have like a huge amounts of data on like how people did that the right way in the past, I think there's opportunities to really ramp up and almost bootstrap how you do it for AI in a meaningful way very, very quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I think, leveraging past data sets is actually something I think a lot of generative AI practitioners don't do today. There's a lot of machine learning data sets that you can find like on Berkeley's website, for example, that are really old school data sets. They're tabular data sets, have literally nothing to do with generative AI, but those are grounded in truth because they were qualified and built very well together. Those lessons are still there. We had a talk earlier where someone was saying, there's going to be a whole bunch of new use cases that do come in. I wouldn't say fear, but the trepidation that I have is, and maybe a question for you guys, is as more and more AI is generating data, more synthetic data sets are coming out, we're seeing a bleeding into ground truths, right? AI is feeding itself over and over again. So if you are building AI products, you really have to think about how will you capture ground truth without human in the loop, unfortunately, right? We want to do human in the loop everywhere, but operations will not work if you're going to continue bog them down with 30, 40% of their time going into feeding AI. And it's artificial, right? So what you need to think about is natural feedback. Natural feedback is, what you were talking about, search. Top 5 ranking. Are they being selected 80% of the time, right? If you're giving a response back, is someone using it downstream for an actual productivity task or an objective? If that's not happening, you don't have real lessons. All you have is AI teaching AI, and then we are going to reach a stagnation of innovation at that point.
Yeah. I think I'll take one aspect of this. Human in the loop, I think, is really important. And there are cases when it doesn't necessarily get there. But there's such a huge area of learning in terms of evals that needs to happen for when we have to go without human in the loop. Yeah. Evals, we're just starting to learn about evals like in a whole new way, especially as people are trying to figure out what to do with agents, what to do with the re-rankers, what to do with a rack-based approach. Evals are beginning to blow up, and they cost a lot of money because you're actually running them through different modes. You might actually have like LLM as a judge, but you might have more specific and more declarative means to be able to do all of that evaluation. Right. I think if we do it the right way, and I still maintain that human in the loop needs to be a huge part of it, but evals might be the beginnings of at least establishing the numbers, and then we can run some stats on what is the likelihood of this data set, because the evals are going to give you some numbers on the likelihood of how this stuff is right or wrong. You can run some stats and make that part of your quality report. This is the likelihood of this data set being, good versus not, and that quality needs to overall improve over time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There were 2 recent papers that I saw recently that kind of excited me about eval and the potential for going in the future. One of those was Meta's latest model that came out that was focused on not using tokenizers for inputs. Now, this is particularly exciting because right now, everything that we feed into large language models go through a tokenizer, and there's an inherent bias in the tokens, right? Because they were trained on specific type of languages that are Latin-based, right? And although we can switch those tokens and we can say, hey, LLM can pick up which token in another language, there's a fundamental knowledge, that is lost in stuff like poetry, right? You read some of the poems in different languages and it's like, it's off, right? Because fundamentally, those type of intuitions are not built in. But now we're getting new models that come out that completely don't look at tokenizers. They're not tokenized. I forgot the name of it, but take a look on Meta's research paper. You'll find it. And there's another type of concept that's coming out, which is agentless frameworks. So the concept around agentless frameworks is the decision-making that you would try to do in agents, you would actually make that with humans, right? So you would make that with, hey, this is how I would evaluate and trust the system. So instead of letting the agents make those decisions, you're going to have a human make those decisions, and then the agent can learn from it. So there are new concepts that are coming out. I think they're going to proliferate very, very quickly, and there's going to be a race to a bottom of implementing those. But is there an awareness yet? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I think very important. I think humans need to make that decision, but the process can be automated. So.
Yeah, I think we're not going to get away from that, right? If there's still more trust in a human's decision because there's skin in the game for that human, right? And the skin in the game is basically if I said something wrong, right, I feel something, right? And that is an intrinsic aspect of trust that when someone's telling me something, if they're wrong, will anything happen? Like if AI tells me something and says, hey, go take this medication, it has no skin in the game because it can't lose its medical license. So will we see licensing for medical AI? Maybe it's a thing we need to think about.
Yep. No, I think I also want to clarify here, like, what we are talking about as decisions is not about the AI's decisions, right? Mm-hmm. The AI's decisions come out, that's an output. But then those decisions, are they in line with our, whatever the business requirements or ethical considerations or risk plans, right?
Right.
So those are the decisions that we call them as HR for agents, right? We call them HR agents, right? No, agent HRs, right?
Yeah,
right?
I love that.
It's basically, there are AI agents, but then there needs to be HR for that agents.
Yeah.
Okay, if they are working properly and if they made a decision, okay, is that right or wrong? If there is a problem, then immediately the HR has to find out and say like, okay, there is a channel, they will work out and then say, okay, no, this decision is wrong, we may have to correct it.
Yeah.
So that is the process I'm talking about that needs to be automated in the governance side. Mm-hmm. And I think it is pretty much very easily can be done. And you don't have to work on that. There's a lot of third-party providers who can help you very well.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you do third-party assessments and providers who can help you with this, then you don't have any blind spot. The trust comes even better, okay? Like Kartik said, the trust starts from internally. Yes, it starts internally, but then a third-party validation will also help you even more trust it.
Absolutely.
So that's something I want.
Yeah, that gets down to the accountability question of ethics, right? If AI makes a mistake, and this was the first question that happened with auto driving for Tesla, and the question was who's liable in an accident? So who's liable in malpractice if the AI makes a mistake? Is it the person who trained, the person who collected the data set? Is it the person who approved that AI to be used? Like those questions go down fundamentally to skin in the game, right? If the AI can keep functioning with no one being willing to take the liability for mistakes, should we trust it?
But essentially, the builder and the user both are being sued. Nowadays, we are hearing a lot of news from that.
Yeah.
I think it's very risky times. I think it is time to be responsible. I think we can get away from it right now, but the near future is going to be, we may need to be careful.
Yeah, if you read through the contracts or if you just talk to attorneys in the field right now, like let's say if I'm using a model on Azure, right? The liability for Microsoft is fairly limited. I can't just point to Microsoft and say they told me so. It's on you, and it's impossible to build those billion-dollar models, at least for now. I mean, there's plenty good models,
right?
But at least for now, you have some dependency on these mega models. And you don't have a framework for responsibility that goes all the way up the chain. Mm-hmm. So maybe that'll change over time, but it also puts the onus on you, the user of the AI, to put into place systems based on statistical analysis, in my opinion, that give you a very clear idea of what it is that you're giving your customers. When you have that, you have something to stand on. Yeah.
I mean, there was this case recently, I don't know if you heard Character AI, where it told a teenager who, in my opinion, probably shouldn't have been using that app in the first place, because there should be age restrictions on, any of these things giving medical recommendations. And that teenager ended up committing suicide because the Character AI bot told him to, right? And that is, the company's still around. That first, right, is probably already a problem. There's no accountability to say, hey, have you fixed that problem? And without that, I think, there's a competitive advantage, as I said. Someone else makes the Character AI and say, hey, we actually not only do we solve this problem, but we do statistical analysis to show you what we know about the risk and what we don't know, and we know when to shut off the AI to prevent situations like this. That inherent trust will be built with the marketplace and the marketplace will be looking for that from other providers, right? That's how we're going to change the game, by making the first car, right? After the Model T, the first safe car was the most popular selling car. And I think that's how it's going to change it. It's going to be market forces. It's going to be consumers demanding accountability for this. So we get ahead of it.
Yeah, and we're about to see a big sort of bomb in terms of like multimodal expressions of models.
That's going to be so interesting.
Because I was checking out this demo from Voyage AI yesterday, and essentially you don't even need to do the intermediate steps for engineering anymore. You can take an image, the model will figure out the text inside it by itself. You don't have to do the engineering step, and it'll still put it'll still place your embeddings very close to where they need to be, so you can get very reasonable outputs.
All right.
How do you test something like that? How do you talk about it, right? It's crazy, but it's so much fun to be in this space to start thinking about these problems.
Yeah, these are a very important problem. It's like, I think there was a sculpture, the story of a sculptor in medieval Italy where he carved the most beautiful woman and then fell in love with the sculpture, and the sculpture came to life. And we're living that world a little bit today, where we're building something that we think is, a part of ourselves that we're putting out and personifying. But the problem with that is like that personification doesn't have any need to be ethical to survive. It doesn't eat, it doesn't have any fears, it doesn't have any hopes, it doesn't have any dreams. And we need to make sure we remember that it's an automaton, it's a statistical parrot, it's only guessing the next word. And so it becomes our responsibility, to put those human aspects in that automaton.
Yeah.
Yep, and thinking about this LLM, I think there's a recent publication in Nature Medicine. It's a very important paper. I think everybody should read. It says that in this paper, the authors, what they did was they tried to poison the data out there that's been used by LLMs to trained. What they did was they tried to find out how much minimum information that I should put in, right? That could actually change the LLM's decision or its output. So they were starting from 0.0001, so from there, and then went higher and higher. They found that even with 0.001% of whatever data that is out there, all they need is only this much data, this much percentage of information that is poisonous. That is enough for LLM to change its way that it is giving decisions.
Can you imagine the misinformation?
It's misinformation, and that's really crazy. So we have to be very cognizant about all these things. So you cannot stop this. You cannot stop terrorists from doing these things. This is going to happen. But how can you mitigate this? Is, okay, what is my business case? How am I using this? Testing. That's
right.
Input, output, what is coming out. Use third party to do that. Be safe.
And build standard operating procedures for when stuff is going to go wrong, because it will. You have to imagine the worst possible thing, like Stoic philosophy, right? You have to imagine the absolute worst thing that will happen, and how will you survive that situation by switching over and out from artificial intelligence to human empathy.
Yep. Are we out of time?
Yeah, somebody stole your timer. I came back, I was like, where's the timer?
Okay, we just carried away. We got carried away.
Oh, it was great. It was great. And yeah, the last, I don't want to stand under the microphone, it'll start to feedback. Yeah, that last bit, it just sounded like, okay, so if that's all the data that you need to change, then really the money in the world is going to be shaping our reality. And maybe that's what we, on the macro side, we have to watch out for. And how do we open source sort of the, I think it's going to be the war for the attention of attention is all you need.
Yes.
I was thinking exactly that line. I was like, it's kind of a side effect of the fact that attention is all you need.
Yeah, we got to make sure our system is safe. We cannot control a lot of other things. What we can control, we can do it.
Yep.
So let's get a show of hands. Who is more optimistic after this talk? About 50%. Who is more pessimistic after this talk?
There you
More
go. We got two.
optimistic. And who's about the same? Okay, about.
We should talk.
Great. More optimistic, which
There
is
you go.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should be, because we're actually learning how to do things right.
See, AI is so important. I'll tell you. Without AI, we cannot survive as a humans over time.
Yeah, due to the
Because
complexities coming in.
think about the climate change issues.
Yeah.
Humans cannot think through that far and bring solutions.
Yeah.
We need AI for it.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
even pick stocks.
Yes.
All right, let's give a big hand to Kartik,
so much.
Ganesan, Devinder. Thank you very much.